Let's get the meeting going. First off is pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A-18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Members of the public who would like to participate in the meeting via Zoom can do so by clicking the link below. Members of the public who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may also do so via telephone by dialing 1-646-558-8656 and enter the meeting ID 895-0594-3058, then press pound again at the next voice prompt. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by following the steps previously noted, and then press *9 on their telephone keypad or using the raise hand function on Zoom. This will notify the meeting host that the caller wishes to speak. In the event that despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide real-time access for this post, a record of this meeting will be on the town's website as soon as we are able. At that point, let's do a roll call of the members. Teresa Manganelli. Teresa?
I'm sorry about that. I'm present.
Okay. John Dugas?
Present.
Mary Ann Galizzo?
Present.
Michelle Kincaid? You're muted, Michelle.
Yep.
Okay.
Present.
Okay. Lee Martinson? Not here. He emailed me earlier. Bernie Nally?
Here.
And Kevin Stokes? And myself, John Doherty. At that point, first on our budget hearing is the police department. Chief Desmond, how you doing?
Good, thank you. That was better. I just unmuted myself. How's everyone tonight?
Good. How are you, Chief?
How are you?
I'm doing well. So I know you've been through a few of these already. If you want, I'll just give a brief synopsis and then open up to questions.
Sounds good.
All right, so as you know, the town manager kind of tasked us with cutting back where we could, or level funding at least some of the operating budget, which I think we've done a pretty decent job of. So as far as capital things we've asked for, we originally asked for 4 vehicles. We're asking for 2 right now, so that there was a savings there. As you know, as far as manpower, we had a plan to do a sergeant and a patrolman one fiscal year, and then a sergeant and patrolman of the next fiscal year. So we discussed it with the town manager, and we decided to keep one of those positions, which we hope will be the sergeant's position. And then at a later type, hopefully maybe next fiscal year, 23, we would revisit the second patrolman's spot at that point. Everything else is fairly what it was last year. Overtime is 675. We're doing fairly well with overtime this year, despite all the issues with COVID-19. If we run into any trouble at the end of the year, it probably shouldn't be by much. So hopefully we'll get lucky as we get to the next 5 months or so, and we'll be able to make it with the overtime. Other than that, everything is pretty much what you saw last year, without any significant changes. And with that, certainly I'll open it up to any questions.
Chief, did you have any officers out with COVID?
We did. So it kind of hit us this fiscal year alone. Probably about 30,000 in overtime was a backfill for COVID.
Okay.
And obviously, I'm sure you've heard the difficulties with that is the quarantine periods. People had to be out for at least 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
They were a direct contact. So we would lose sometimes 4 or 5 people, even though they never got ill, they couldn't return to work, and therefore had to be backfilled. So, certainly with the vaccines here, we haven't had anyone get sick since, post-vaccine. So we're certainly hoping as we go into the spring and summer, at least our own people will be impacted less.
Okay.
Was that overtime covered through any of the grant money?
Right. So it's obviously we don't have the money yet, but we
Right.
submitted it with with that. So hopefully at some point at least it'll come back in some form.
Yeah, it might take a little while.
Right. But I guess we'll take it.
Yep.
Chief, I
Chief, let me-
noticed, I noticed some differences in your stats for this year. Where you had, your arrests went down significantly, automobiles were down significantly. So I guess people are staying home, huh?
Yeah. The only thing that went up was citations. So at least the offices were busy, but yeah, automobile accidents, but that's directly related to the lack of automobiles on the road for, the majority of the year because of the pandemic. Firearms permits went up. I don't know what the reason for that was. But yeah, obviously we were impacted by the lack of traffic and things like that. So, obviously as we get into hopefully the post-COVID world, I'm sure those things will go back to where they were.
Did everyone get the notice from Chris to please identify yourself before you speak? Thank you.
Chief, this is Mary Ann Galezo. Just
Hi.
a quick question on the uniforms. Is that just regular maintenance? It seems to have spiked up quite a bit.
Right. So we kept that. That's, the major issue with that is new hires. That's where a lot of that cost comes. So we potentially could be putting 4 people through an academy this year. So obviously we'd have to start from scratch with the uniforms. So, and obviously the increase overall with the number of people means that would come up. But that, once we stop this little hiring frenzy, at least eventually, that should kind of, go down a bit.
John Doherty. Chief, the academy's open?
Yes, they are. There are spots open this spring,
Okay.
much different than it was in the fall. So we're certainly hopeful. We've got 4 spots to fill right away. So fingers crossed, we'll get some spots in those academies this spring.
What is the time frame for the academy?
There's a couple, but they're basically April and May. There are spots open, which is good. All our candidates have to go through at least, I think, the physical and the psych evaluations before we can reserve a spot. So
Okay.
we hope in the next few weeks, we're going to have that done and be able to at least hold the spots.
That'd be great.
Yes.
This is Bernie speaking, Joe. Where do you hope to send your candidates?
Wherever we can find a spot. I know Reading has some spots. And at this point, we can't really be choosy as to where we send them as long as they're accredited academy. We need the bodies right now. So even, if it's an issue of, academy that's further away, again, we'll take it.
Yeah. Okay.
Mary Ann Galezo, Chief.
Yep.
Have you been able to implement the other quadrant for the town yet?
No, not yet. Obviously that's our goal, but, we just don't have the manpower yet. The plan was for the 2 and 2. So we're getting closer, but it's always the unforeseen. We had one officer decide to retire this year. Younger officer decided to go to the private sector. So that put us back to the 4 positions we have now, plus the 2 that we got at town meeting. So, that is still the goal. But right now we just don't have the staff to implement that full time.
And so how many do you have on per shift right now? Is it 3 at night and?
Right. So for the most part, if it's, no one's off, we don't backfill, then there's usually a rover plus 3 sector cars.
And that's on every shift?
Yeah, just about. I mean, there's sometimes we won't fill a rover, we'll run it with 3 shifts. Unless we feel it's a busy night, like a weekend night or something like that. We don't automatically fill to that. But yeah, most shifts, it's 3 cars plus a rover.
Now, have you gotten the detective cars in as of yet?
Yes, the 2 edges that we ordered last year are in.
And you want 2 additional patrol cars this year, right?
Right, we're looking to replace cars 34 and 39. I'm sorry, 29.
John Jari, Chief, with the increase of personnel, are you looking to add cars?
We are actually down cars, but at this point, for this fiscal year, we can revisit that next year, but our
Okay.
priorities, we think now are 29 and 34, the 2 line cars. That's at that point, but, clearly as we grow, that is a concern of ours, especially with detectives sharing cars and things like that. A social worker at times, Samantha, has had to use her own vehicle. I'm not a big fan of that, but sometimes it's just not one available. But certainly for this year anyways, we want to revisit the 2 line cars.
Next question, for Chief Desmond and probably Jeff. You have increases in personnel on both sides, police and fire. That building, is it going to be sufficient?
Well, I would say that our big issue right now is locker room space. And especially with our female locker room. We're probably about 1 more female hire away from having some difficulty in there, which we'll have to adjust to. So we are seeing some, after so many years, we are getting to the point where in some ways we're outgrowing the building.
Mary Ann Galezzo, just to follow up on the patrol cars, Chief.
Yep.
I count 16 patrol cars at this point, right? Is that what you have in your inventory?
Patrol, we have 9 marked cars, plus 3 traffic cars, which is semi-marked for patrol.
Okay, so what would besides the other cars that are marked detective, then where are these other cars in the rotation? Are they spare cars that you have at the point, or?
Well, if you're talking specifically about the 2 we're replacing, those particular cars we prioritize because they were both involved in accidents. They're 2017 vehicles. So by the time we actually get approval for these, get them ordered, they'll be ready to be, moved to the DPW, which we have them slated for 2022. And once we get the 2 new versions, they'll go to the DPW.
Okay, when you said that one was in an accident, is it drivable or is it total?
Sure. Oh, no, they're being used now. It's just, one of the factors that go into deciding which cars to replace.
Okay.
Both of them had, in fact, one of them was in 2 accidents. They've all been fixed and they're serviceable. But it's just, when it comes time to, we don't want to push our luck with them.
Right. If I could ask, I know I'm looking at the vehicle book, but
Yep.
Chief, if you could give me a total breakdown of what cars that you have, and what they're used for.
Right. Let me do a quick calculation. I believe 6 of them are used for administration, so those are unmarked. 7 unmarked cars are used specifically for detectives. 3 of them are semi-marked. Those are the traffic and safety cars. 9 marked, and then 1 ACO.
So you have 6 administration cars? And
Yes,
that's unmarked?
that's correct.
And they're probably referred to in here as maybe gray?
Yeah, yes.
And who uses the administration cars?
So that would be, myself, the deputy lieutenants primarily.
Chief John Doherty, what type of plates do they have on them?
Variety, I think most are just, if you're talking about the admin cars,
Yeah, are they municipal plates, police plates, or
No.
plain plates?
they're just plain plates,
Okay.
just like a regular vehicle.
Any other questions for the chief? Seeing none, I have one thing. I have to apologize to our new member, Andy. It was not on our roster list when we got the agenda, and I would like to welcome on board. And Andy, you are present, right?
Present, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we keep on going?
Sure, yeah. So I've lived in Wilmington for since 2002. I've got 2 kids and my wife. We live on Chestnut Street. My kids are 17 and 14. And I guess the other piece is I've worked at Fidelity for also 20 years. I define myself as very boring. I've been in the same town. I've been in the same company for 20 years. So I'm happy to join the finance committee and over the next year or so. Thank
Welcome
you.
on board.
Thanks.
Welcome on board.
Oh, welcome.
Thanks.
Next, do we want to do central dispatch next? With Chief Desmond and Chief Kavanaugh?
Sure.
And that's on page 36. Okay, Chief Kavanaugh or Chief Desmond's going to do this one?
I guess I can start. He's been on the hot seat long enough.
I didn't think it was that bad. Come
Wasn't
on.
that bad at all.
No,
Really?
it wasn't terrible.
Must be your turn this year.
You guys were gentle. I hope. Yeah, I hope. So, like Chief had said, we're kind of status quo with dispatch this year. We're seeing an increase in overtime. Now, one of the big reasons for this is, if you remember last year, we had doubled the overtime from 50 to 100,000. And a big reason for that was because it was, in my estimation, incorrectly calculated. I don't want to, I'll leave it at that. So we did the increase. We were hoping this year to have a full staff. We had increased to 13 members as opposed to 12. That includes our supervisor. And we are still working on getting to that. We've had a few hires. People have come in. We've done some training. They haven't made it. So I believe this overtime number here is just as we're up to 175. Typically about 50,000 of that is reimbursable through state grant. But we are hoping that is an overshoot at a minimum, because we don't expect to have this level of turnaround at this point. Now, obviously, time will tell. Some of the overtime for the past year was covered for COVID, because we did have a few people that were suspected contacts and or had COVID. So some of the money you're seeing in the current budget will be covered. So that's really the big push on this. That's the big change you'll see. The dispatch supervisor, Corey Swift, is here too. If you have any real specific questions about the line items, we can delve a little further into that.
Anybody have any questions for either Chief Kavanaugh, Chief Desmond, or Corey?
Teresa Manganelli, is the renovation complete?
Yes. Yeah, so the renovation is actually complete. We completed about 2 weeks ago. We have some loose odds and ends that we're tying up, but all the equipment and the furniture was taken out. The floor was repaired and replaced. The equipment was put back in on the new furniture, which is, I don't know if you caught the selectmen's meeting a few weeks ago, we did discuss it. It came out very nice. Corey Swift, who's again our dispatch supervisor, did a phenomenal job planning it out and getting us the most bang for our buck with that. We have some very, very good equipment, state of the art. It's a very nice room, and I've had nothing but positive feedback from the dispatch personnel with that room since we finished.
Thank you.
Bernie, Nally, do we have any additional equipment beyond what we normally had in the past?
In this current budget, Chief?
No, in the new, the renovated office, communication center.
No. So what we did, Chief, was in the past few years, we did put together some new stuff, some fire alarm alerting and receiving equipment, and then we changed the fire alarm alerting system, the Zetron system that we use to tone out calls and do radio controls. So we already had changed that. So this is more the furniture, the dispatch remodel project was more the furniture that's all integrated into. So before it was, and it was the older desks, they were all stationary. Now these ones, they stand up, they move independently. All of the monitors are on a roller vision, so they all move together now. So we reuse it's not old equipment, it's new equipment, but the previously purchased equipment, and we put it onto this new, all the new furniture.
In other words, if I come back in, I couldn't operate it too well.
I don't think so.
Mary Ann Galezzo, Chief, what are you currently at for the overtime on dispatch right now? Roughly.
Corey, do you have that number in front of you? Only because if I pull that up, I'm going to lose this meeting.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
It's about 128,000 that's spent in FY21 year to date.
There
Okay.
we go.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Welcome.
Team effort here.
But, yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I could, Jeff
Sure,
Hull.
Jeff.
So one of the points that I think needs to be made about dispatch and overtime, as much as we're clearly looking to get into a place where this overtime number can be dialed back a bit, I think one of the challenges that is unique about dispatch, and this, we certainly have seen a higher number to this point than we have in years past. But for some of you who have been on the committee for some period of time, you will know that in prior years, we've also had the overtime in excess of the budgeted amount. As Chief Kavanaugh noted, to some measure, I guess I would chalk it up to perhaps trying to be over optimistic in prior years, keeping it at 50,000 on the premise that we would be able to keep people in the positions. But, the reality of the dispatch position is, number one, in many respects, it is a training ground for police and fire. We had two individuals in this current fiscal year that had been dispatchers that moved on to fire. We have two individuals in the current dispatch mix that are on a permanent intermittent list for the prospect of going into the police. So, and I think in some respects, it's beneficial to have personnel that are in dispatch and they see what goes on. They're in the midst of it in terms of communication, and they can go on to be police or fire officers. But, ultimately that creates a challenge for us because we're on some regular basis having people move out of the dispatch ranks and on to police or fire. As Chief Kavanaugh noted, this position is unique, and I would say it takes a special set of qualities to be in dispatch. It's a high intensity environment. In a minute's notice, you're trying to get dispatched information out to police or fire. You're trying to counsel and calm down perhaps the caller. So there's a lot of particular qualities that are unique to this position. And what we've seen in many instances is we will get people who think they want to try it, and then they either get into the mix, and then they realize this isn't for them. There are very few instances, quite frankly, where we're getting dispatchers from other communities. They're typically individuals who have no prior dispatch experience. They think they want a career change, and certainly there's an interview process, a review process that Corey and the chiefs are involved in, and the efforts are made to try to identify the qualities that are going to work for them, for the town. But it's just a very difficult department to keep people in. And quite frankly, I don't really see that changing. I think for the foreseeable future, people are going to come into dispatch with the idea of moving on to police and fire, and we're probably still going to see people looking to try it out, and ultimately, some cases it works, in some cases it doesn't. So I'd like to say that we have a permanent solution here to trying to keep a solid group of people in dispatch, and we do have, I believe, about 5 of the individuals who have been in the department for some period of time, and clearly like the idea of being dispatchers. So we're fortunate in that respect, because it's very important to have people with some level of seniority and experience that the others can be tutored, if you will.
Sandra, two questions, either for Jeff, Corey, or the chief. What's our average turnover rate?
I'll answer that just to clarify some of the points. Right now, we're averaging. We get 2 hired in, and of the 2, we're hopeful that 1 will make it. So our turnover rate this year so far, we've had 6 people hired, and of the 6, I've had 2 that are staying and actually made it through training. So for a variety of reasons, sometimes it's personality, sometimes they just don't have the aptitude. The ones that stay, one of them is also what the town manager alluded to, with somebody on a police list. So he's about ready to get put on his own, and Chief Desmond might just scoop him right up. So we're at that point where we're making the hires. We're absolutely trying to get staffed. It's just a matter of the timeline for training. We give them as much time as we can. We do as much effort as we can to make them serviceable. And that takes about 3 months just for somebody that's ready to go, that can do it. But that's 3 months that we're then behind. So we're constantly playing catch up with the people that after the 3 months, they decide that they can't do the job, or we decide that they can't do the job and that they're not a fit. So that's 3 months that we're behind. So we're constantly trying to play catch up. So we don't overhire, and that's some of that attrition is that we, after 3 months, and really they have 4 or 5 months invested in the job by the background check, getting the physical done. We find ourselves constantly having to struggle with, making that tough decision that says that this person can't really work here and can't do the job successfully. So I just wanted to add that as well, that there's that kind of a component where, we are at a point where we thought we were fully staffed, and we know everybody said you should have knocked on wood, man, because everybody ended up going elsewhere out of that hiring class. So
The second question is, how do we stand with other towns for the pay? Are we low? Are we medium? Are we high? Where's our pay scale?
I don't know that we've done a survey. I don't know, Corey, if you have, but my understanding, at least the last time we had checked, we were probably mid to low.
Yep, and I would agree with that. I haven't surveyed around. I know that the Tewksbury Center that just opened up is a little bit higher, but they are a regional center, so they get a lot more grant money than we do, so they can kind of afford to pay a little bit better. But we have to compete with some of these other towns that, Andover pays significantly more than us, and they're right next door. So we're not by any means low in this, as far as the state's concerned. We're kind of like the town manager said. I would agree with that. And just as an industry wide, the citation, it's cited almost everywhere that nationwide, if you Google dispatch short staffed, It's about an 18% turnover rate, just in the best of conditions. So it's significantly higher than police or fire, where people get in and they stay. People get burned out. That's pretty much where that's at, everywhere, not just in the town of Wilmington or even in Massachusetts. That's nationwide.
A follow-up question to that, Mary Ann Galeazzo. I know if you do the regional search that dispatch, the retention rate's not that well. But when you talk to an Andover, which I don't think you have at this point, is their retention rate better because they are paying more?
Some of the towns that pay significantly more than us that I can think of off the top of my head are Concord, Lexington. Those are two separate departments. Andover, things like that. They do seem to have a better retention rate, but I don't know that causality is there. I think it's just a matter of it's a different set of circumstances. Our job is significantly more difficult in keeping and retaining people because I think that it's just a nature of how we do our job. Some of these other towns, they have, we're getting up to the point where we have all the same equipment that they have. I mean, that was a huge driving factor, with the town giving us the money to revamp our center. So it looks like a modern dispatch center. It's something that, you can be proud of. So I think that will help. We're investing in people more than we have so in the past. So I don't know if the retention rate will continue to be lower. But I know that as far as other towns are concerned, like in Andover, stuff like that, they still have a retention problem. They still have people that are using it as a stepping stone. It's not that much different from us, despite the increase in pay.
Chair, the other point I would just make, and this has been a kind of a longstanding frustration for me, is that in spite of the efforts that Corey makes to pursue the reimbursement for some of the salary, that money always comes in after the close of the fiscal year, which is just unfortunate because while it's intended to arguably reimburse for some of the overtime costs, it ultimately just goes to free cash. So I guess it's good that we're getting the money. It goes to the general fund. But, it would be nice if there was a way that the state could restructure it so that it came back to and truly reimbursed the department.
Teresa Manganelli, maybe that's something that we could put a note in these budgets, that in the previous year, we received X amount of dollars in compensation for overtime.
We could certainly look at doing that going forward.
Great, that'd be great. Thank you.
And this year, just if Mr. Chair, if I may, just as an aside, the state has allocated this year for our PSAP $78,159 through the support and incentive grant. So most of that we tend to use that for personnel costs. So that is an increase. And part of that is because they adjust it annually based on call volume and also whether or not we take cell phone calls directly. And we are currently taking wireless phase 2. If we continue to go down this road, I believe that will probably stay similar to the same. I don't think it's going to increase again, but we did see a large increase when we started taking cell phone calls direct last year. And then again into this year, they're kind of incentivizing us to take those cell calls directly. And we did go ahead and put that project and tell the state we wanted to do that. So that's a significant portion that's just in the support and incentive grant. And then there's also the training grant that also is needs-based. So as we have more people hired and we have to send them to training, that gets covered. And then our 16 annual continuing education credits also get covered, as well as usually it's the overtime, whether it's the person who's going to the class or the person that is sitting in for that person going to the class. They'll only pay one or the other. So, and that's needs-based. So we don't really know what that is until we start deciding who's going to what classes and how much money we're actually going to spend. So that's not a fixed amount like the support incentive grant, which has a formula to it that the state created.
Any other questions for either Corey or Chief Kavanaugh on the center? Seeing none?
No.
Next is Fire Department. Chief Kavanaugh.
Oh, good night.
You're on.
All right, so the fire department, what you're gonna see, it's gonna be glaring right off the bat, is about a $700,000 increase at the end of it. So a big part of that is you'll look at the overtime, and I might as well just get it right out of the way off the bat. The overtime we've put in for 1.4 million. Now, there's a reason. We had done a reduction last year based on the fact that we were going to have 8 new members out of the academy by July. Unfortunately, and I'm going to use the phrase everyone hates, is because of COVID, the academy had shut down. So we were slated originally to have all of our new members, our new hires, done by the second week of July, which would have put us in the very beginning of that fiscal year. We would have had 11 across the board. We would have been able to hire down to 10. That didn't happen. We held the academy, or the academy got held on us until I think my last person came out of the academy in December. And now I have another one in there now. I had one person not make it, so they've separated. I also had Chief McMahon's retirement, which we hadn't hired for yet. Firefighter Patriot retired, and then abruptly Lieutenant Daly had retired as well. So I had a couple of other spots that I had to do that I had to fill, that I haven't. So I think this is a with speaking with the manager, I think this 1.4 is an extremely liberal number. And I think that I hope to be able to put a lot of that back. I don't believe that this is going to be a total line item, because I should have my membership taken care of. We have a new fire list coming out March 15th. In comparison, this should have been out in December. So we had exhausted the original list with the 9 hires that we made. And then, obviously we didn't have another list to go off of. So this is where we are, unfortunately. I'm also still carrying an injury that Kerry has been working extremely hard on to get. It's got to be a retirement injury, unfortunately, we think. And we're trying to work on that. So that's the unfortunate part. Take that number out of there, we went up 1% overall. Most of it's contractual. I've basically level funded the rest of the budget. I feel pretty comfortable with the fact that I can operate in what I have for, under my contractual services, radio repairs, stuff like that. My discretionary funds, I guess, is if that's the best way to say it. So the other thing too with this is I know Brian has already put in the bottom, there's a little footnote that there's going to be a portion of the firefighter salary line item offset by the SAFER grant. We're going to be entering into year 2 of that in March. And that's a 75% reimbursement. And then next year in March, it'll be 35%. So you're going to see that go up next year a little bit.
And Chair Doherty, just Jeff Hull, just one other item to add. As with the police, the fire did have some instances of COVID-related absences. So, that of course added to the mix, but the largest element of the overtime issue was associated with inability to get people into academies because they were closed. And then the list, the civil service list. So anytime a hire is done, we have to pull off of a civil service list. The chief and I had a number of conversations about the prospect of going to the non-EMT list. So there's an EMT list. And as you know, we require firefighters to be EMT certified. And there's a requirement, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have to be certified within 1 year of their hire. And we talked about the prospect of pursuing folks off the non-EMT list But I think there are a number of pitfalls there because in some respects, if someone's been on an EMT list, if someone's been on a civil service list for some period of time and they haven't seen fit to get their EMT card, at least in my estimation, you begin to question whether they're really motivated to pursue it. And last thing we want to do is spend the time, effort, and money bringing someone up through the system only to find out that they just are not going to be able to get the card. So ultimately, we chose not to pursue that option.
John Doherty, either Mr. Hull or Chief Kavanaugh, what's the cost of sending someone for an EMT card?
So the cost varies across the board based on which company you go with, and we did actually consider that to hire a couple non-EMTs, put them through a class. We had discussed that with town council. They told us it probably wasn't in our best interest because we were technically giving kind of an unfair advantage to those that we would have picked up as a non-EMT, and then we supply their EMT class. So they kind of persuaded us to stay away from that avenue because that was something that we discussed.
What's the difference in pay grade between a non-EMT and a EMT?
So the difference in pay grade, 1 second, I get it for you.
But just to, Jeff Hull, just to note for folks, I think the last time we had a non-EMT in the ranks was probably about, 15 years ago.
Yep.
Gentleman's name escapes me now, but he, Chief, you may recall.
That was Richard Hughes. He retired in 2008, and he was an EMT originally, but he was able. There was a time where we were allowed to drop our cards, and Rich decided that he didn't feel like working on the bus anymore, so he dropped that card and went down. But to answer your question, currently, F1 firefighter, entry-level firefighter, step 1, $1,089.13 a week. Step 1 EMT, $1,150.15 a week. So it's a difference of about little over $3,100 a year.
You're best off getting an EMT.
That's, well, one of the things we were thinking too is the national test is difficult. So we spend the time and the money and giving them free release from work. We're still paying them, and then they fail that test a bunch of times and they just can't handle it. Now we've wasted time, money, and effort to do it. Yes, absolutely.
Any other questions for Chief Kavanaugh?
Yeah, Mary Ann Galezzo. Chief, what are you up to now as far as overtime?
Oh, we are, Brian, you want to get that one? You have the current.
Yeah, we're at about 748,000 right now.
All right, and what is the emergency management stipend? That's new this year. New line item.
That is new.
Yeah, that is to cover the chief for his role as the emergency management coordinator. We've had that role for some period of time, and there's, in my estimation, really a lot to it. He's been, as you know, very involved with Shelley, most recently here in terms of COVID, and so I felt it was important to acknowledge the time, effort that goes into that role.
And thank you, Chief. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
In this environment. If we could switch over to just your runs.
Sure.
I'm surprised to see number of ambulance calls down.
Yeah, so a big reason for that, when COVID really started getting up, April-ish, April, May was a very weird time at the station. We were honestly handling just emergencies. and I say that, I want to be careful how I say it. We weren't getting the I don't feel good runs. We weren't getting the I feel like I might have tweaked something. I want to go to the hospital runs. We were getting, heart attacks and strokes and diabetic issues and cardiac arrests, major car accidents. We were, people were refusing to go to the hospital. This morning, I was driving down Glen Road, went out to a car accident. Woman had back pain and said, "Hey, do you want to go to the hospital?" "No, I'm scared of COVID." They didn't want to go. So that's really equating it. And I know, that's just one for me, but my personnel deal with this multiple times a day. And a lot of times we have people that are critical. They need to be going to the hospital and they are deathly afraid to get into an ambulance and go to a medical facility because they're afraid they're going to get COVID. So our number of ambulance calls, that's transports. That's not just calls, that's transports in general, are down. And, my peers, I asked some of the other municipalities that operate ambulances and even our private ambulance company, Action, they're down across the board.
But I actually see psychological evaluations are way up.
Yeah. And that's part of what we're really seeing. Fall victims is way up. We have a lot more elderly at home that are unassisted. You got to remember, a lot of people are staying away from mom and dad or grandma and grandpa because they don't want to bring things in that these people are staying in their home. So they're dropping groceries at the door, they're leaving them right inside, and they're not there to help them do these everyday things that they used to do. The psychological stuff, we're seeing it a lot. And I know last night on the selectmen's meeting, Lou was on, and he talked about veterans in crisis, and it's across the board. People are having a really tough time with this. People are losing jobs. People are stuck at home. There's not really any recreation. There's not a lot of just kind of regular blow off steam type of activities to do. And the few that there are to do, some people are just so afraid of it that they're just sitting at home and that they're getting in their own heads. And, it makes it difficult. So we are seeing a lot of that now, and dealing with the best we can. One of the things I can point out to you is even though we're down quite a bit in ambulance transports, our overall run volume has not really dropped off much. Dropped off less than 100 calls, about 80 calls.
John Doherty, Chief, what has changed in the sanitization of the ambulances since COVID?
So when we, before, so pre-COVID, what we used to do is if you had a call with a sick person there, you go in, you wipe everything down. That was kind of the driver's job. So the way we're set up, when the ambulance arrives on scene, the driver usually will get the main body of information, demographics, kind of what's going on. The technician, the person who's riding the ambulance, will speak directly with the patient, ask them what's going on, how do you feel? They take vital signs, they assess, they decide if they need any sort of splinting or any of those types of things. And the engine company will typically do patient movement. So they'll put them on a chair or put them on a stretcher. And then at the hospital, the driver is in charge of restocking the bag, cleaning up the back of the ambulance, wiping it down. That was it. Well, now what we're doing, especially in the very beginning, I put in a policy that if there's any suspected COVID patient in the back of that vehicle, it comes back from the hospital out of service. It comes back out. We have the disinfecting guns, the electrostatic guns that are, they're not just, originally we couldn't get them. So we got an idea. One of the firefighters had a friend in another department, and they converted one of our air packs into a disinfecting spray gun with a paint gun and a couple of couplers. And we had some old packs that we never got rid of. So they're just training packs. So we used one of those. We made one. And then they also put our decon trailer and made shelves to hang suits and all these other things. So now what they're doing is they come back out of service. We're cleaning everything. The whole ambulance gets wiped down, and then it gets hit with a disinfecting gun, the stretcher, anything that was touched, all the countertops, it gets mopped. And then personnel, obviously, like if the patient was coughing excessively or anything like that, the personnel are wearing Tyvek suits, which they never really wore before.
Yep.
So we were deconning those. Now, Lieutenant Woods actually, very heads up move, was now that we have a little bit of a lull, he was able to get us quite a few, actually a considerable amount of PPE just got delivered today from the National Guard. So we are still exploring those avenues to help get PPE in the building without having a cost to the town. So things like that are happening. So they're wearing gowns, they're wearing Tyvek suits, they're deconning the ambulances on the way back, a very heavy level decon that we never really had to do before unless we had an extremely sick patient that caused a mess in the ambulance.
That's great. That's absolutely great. I'd ask Chief Desmond, I'm going to ask you, when you come to full complement, how stretched is your space going to be?
I'm pretty stretched. So all the bunk rooms, except for two rather. So the way the firehouse itself is set up, for those who haven't been up there, the admin wing is the admin wing, but the living quarters, there's 2 bedrooms on the Church Street side, and there's a day room. We call it a day room. Use it for training. They use it for kind of just relaxing and hanging out. So there's 2-man bedrooms there. There's 2. There used to be 1 lieutenant's bedroom on the corner right by the staircase, and then there was a big room in the far corner and 3 bedrooms on the parking lot side when I first got there. So they were all 2-person rooms with lockers, 4 lockers in each room, and then the big room had 8 lockers and 3 racks. We changed the library, so we used to have a library room where they fill overtime, and we have books in there. They sit and when it's promotional time, they study. We turned that into a bedroom for the second officer. So we have 2 single officer rooms, but now we need more lockers because we have more personnel. So we had to turn a couple of the rooms into single rooms, and then a couple rooms still have doubles, but we're pretty stretched on space as well. Really hoping that eventually the substation will come to fruition once we can get there. And that'll help alleviate a lot of space issues that we're having upstairs. Right now we're okay because we're still at 9. I'm still filling to 9, but once we go to 10 and 11, it gets crammed in there pretty quick.
I'm going to put the spotlight on Mr. Hull. The substation, where do we stand on that?
We are looking at one location in particular, the Benevento property. I really, given that most of the conversations have taken place in executive session, I can't really offer a lot, but there's discussions about the prospect of the property that is next to the highway garage, working with Mr. Benevento to establish an arrangement there. We had looked also, you may recall, at a property on 125. That property is under the care, custody, and control of the water commissioners. It was acquired back in 1934 for protection of the Browns Crossing well field. There is an area that is high and dry, so to speak, but I think I don't want to speak for the chief, but I think it's fair to say that he had some concerns about emergency vehicles accessing onto 125, which is, as you know, the speeds there are pretty high. That property was also Article 97 property, which means it requires significant effort to remove it from that designation, which is essentially, protected land, if you will. So the focus has really changed now to this property on Andover Street.
John Jari, I have a couple of questions and/or comments. On the 125 property, couldn't signalization prevent the speeds there so that a emergency vehicle could get onto 125?
That was certainly talked about as, if that was to be seriously considered, there would be, a signalization. And I think we would probably look at that in either location, whether it's Andover Street or 125. But there's just serious hurdles with trying to get the property out of Article 97. It's really, and I think it's by design that the property is intended to be protecting, well fields in this case. And so it would require a 2/3 vote of the town meeting. It requires a vote of Conservation Commission. The state legislature has to vote on it. So there are, a number of hurdles there. And I think my sense is in conversations with the members of the Board of Selectmen that they are not inclined to pursue that property at this time.
John Doherty, my second part of that is I would have a concern with Andover Street, the size of it, for the ladder truck and some of the other trucks to go up and down it. What would be the cost to redo that street so it's easily accessible for the emergency vehicles?
Well, I certainly can't offer a cost at the moment. I have to believe it's going to be significant because, as you know, that's it's a windy, really a country road, narrow. So, yeah, I would anticipate that would be a pretty significant cost.
Well, I do appreciate that comment. The plan would not be to put the tower truck in that station. It would be a pump. They transverse that road pretty frequently because they do fuel every other day in the trucks.
But that's not an emergency situation, though. That's just to refuel.
I understand that. I understand the question. I don't know if it's to me it's the more attractive of the two spots. But again, I get what you're saying. I do understand. I'm concerned with the amount of hillside there and the steep drop off on one side. I don't know if it's even feasible to stretch that road, Mr. Doherty, but it'd be something that we would probably have to get
it would be tough
Mike
to do.
Woods on. Yeah, we'd have to get Mike Woods to him and Jamie and Joe to look at that.
What about someplace at the corner of Andover and 125?
So that's kind of our target area. We've looked at a bunch of things. There's property is scarce there. One of those spots we looked at as well was the corner of adjacent to the Hardin Tavern, which is privately owned. There is a spot of town-owned land up just past Shea Concrete, but when we looked at it, we weren't, neither me nor Jeff were in favor of that due to the heavy trucking that goes on there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's in a really kind of tight, weird turn. So we weren't too excited about that area either. So, just Wilmington in general with buildable property is extremely difficult to come by, especially when you're trying to put a fire station there with some room for a police precinct and potentially some expansion.
If I remember correctly, the Archdiocese has some land up by Salem and Andover that's undeveloped.
I'd have to look at that.
Whereabouts?
I'm not
Salem.
sure. It was in conversations in finance committee meetings quite a few years ago. I'm just wondering if that would be available.
Well, we can certainly look into it. It's not ringing a bell, but we certainly can take a look at that.
Anybody have it? Teresa?
Teresa Manganelli. Jeff, we've been hearing about the Benevento property for a little while now, without giving too much away since you are in discussions regarding that property. What do you think would be a reasonable amount of time to expect to have some sort of decision made either way?
Well, I'd like to be in a position to have something to put forward for the next annual town meeting. Ultimately, it comes down to whether we can reach some agreement on an arrangement there, but that would be my goal.
Okay, thank you.
Either Mr. Heller or Chief Kavanaugh, how much land are we looking at?
Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. I think for the station itself, we were looking for about 2 acres.
Yeah, in the 2 to 3 acre range. I don't know if anybody's had an opportunity to see the Burlington substation
Yes,
off of Middlesex.
Yeah.
That one, I believe, is about 2. It is somewhat constrained because they have some wetlands in the back there, but it's the chief and I went over there probably more than a year ago now, I guess, but it was a pretty impressive setup that they had over there.
Chief, John Doherty, Chief, would you duplicate that station?
So parts of it. So I think walking through that station, they did a good job thinking it out. One of the issues they have, they weren't able to do any sort of drive-through. So I believe there's a good amount of wasted space in the back of the apparatus area, which I would like to utilize. So I would do all the way through doors. Also up in the living area. I feel like for our usage, we could better utilize some space, but the regular design or the size is right. The design doesn't fit in that area. They're in a they took that station, made it extremely modern, just like the district area and up in the by the Archer Hotel. So it fits the neighborhood now. That wouldn't fit in Wilmington anywhere. So I would do something similar footprint, similar size, but I think some of the logistics on it would have to change.
Okay. Any other questions? John?
John Dugas, I've got one quick question on the budget back for you, Chief Kavanaugh. I know it's not big money, but the paid holidays looks like it's up close to 30%. I just want to know what that one's due, because it just doesn't. I was trying to find another holiday item in the budget that was up that much, but there's a little bit of an outlier.
So one of the things that we put in for paid holidays, so obviously we have some longevity, contractual increases, stuff like that are coming at us with some new membership as well. Also, the way that the contract is laid out, it states 11 paid holidays, and then any other federal or state named holidays go in automatic. So with the advent of Juneteenth last year being named a federal holiday, we felt as though it was appropriate to account for that holiday in there. So that's what the increase would be for.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Kavanaugh?
Yeah, more of a point. Chief, I got a email today from Leahy saying that they're gonna stop booking appointments for the vaccination.
Yes.
I called a contact over there at Leahy, and they're expecting Johnson & Johnson to get approved, and that the state is going to start giving it to all the hospitals, the Johnson & Johnson vaccination. Kind of early, but have you heard anything in the pipeline about our Department of Health getting anything in that
No.
dump, maybe?
No, and again, this is the selectmen's meeting last night. We had discussed this with Shelley. I'm extremely disappointed in the governor and what he decided to do, without kind of getting too far off topic, because the finance committee meeting. We put a lot of work into our emergency management plan. It's not just oh, hey, by the way, let's get this done. Like my normal job, if we got a house fire now, I just have to figure out what I got when I show up, and we kind of roll with the punches. We have an emergency distribution plan that we have to update and send into the state every single year for approval. We have that plan. We just updated that plan last February, just because it was when we got together and did that as the emergency management team. And now, honestly, the governor taking the vaccines away from the local boards of health, it really is a blow to us and how much faith that the state has in the local governments to carry out plans that are approved by the state. So I don't think we're going to get them unless something drastic happens. For some reason, they're just they're giving to the bigger entities, and that's what it is. So I don't foresee us getting any of them. I know today Kim MyTech put out on the Board of Health page that they do have some vaccine for 75 plus. It's limited. So if you know someone, you have them call as soon as possible tomorrow. Hopefully they can get one. And what Shelley had said is anyone who has gotten one already is guaranteed a second one. So, but to answer your question, no, I don't think we're going to get anything. It's disappointing, but it's unfortunately the hand we were dealt.
Thank you. Again, thank you for everything. You and Shelley.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions for Chief Kavanaugh?
No, Teresa Manganelli, I would just like to repeat what's been said so far. We're very grateful to have you and our Director of Health at the helm. It gives us all, I think, a great deal of comfort to know that you're out there, you're working on our behalf, and I share your frustration over the way the state allocated or did not allocate vaccines to the local level. I think about it all the time. I just don't get it. So much could have been done at the local level. But in any event, thank you very much. In spite of all your frustrations, I think you guys are doing a great job and we appreciate
A
it.
fantastic job.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
John Doherty, to our host, do we have any online or on the phone for questions?
I do not see any.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just, and I think we missed the animal control. I'm not sure if Chief Desmond is on, but I can speak to it in general terms. I don't have, some of the detail that he would have, but if you just quickly going through that, as you know, Chris Sullivan is our animal control officer. He continues to do a real solid job responding to all kinds of calls. I was on a Zoom session here with him last week when he had to break off because he had an eagle that crashed into a window. So he's out on a regular basis, taking care of all the critters out there. So his budget is really the same as it is in the current fiscal year. It's really composed of the salary. We put some amount, $4,000 in for overtime. If on occasion he'll get called out on a weekend or late evening. Contractual services cover costs associated with instances where he may have to bring an animal to the animal hospital, and then office supplies and miscellaneous. It's pretty straightforward.
Any questions for Mr. Hull on animal control? Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for either Chief Desmond, Chief Kavanaugh, Town Manager?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Quick question to Chief Desmond. Did you get your rifles in? Did you order those and get those?
We have not invoiced them yet. They have been ordered, but like everything else, there are production delays, but they are ordered. And obviously, we're going to make sure the money gets spent before the end of the fiscal year. So we hope within the next month or so, we should see them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll go on to the next order of business. Approval of the minutes of February 2nd.
Teresa
Has anyone-
Manganelli, I make a motion to approve the minutes
For a
of
sec-
February 2nd as presented.
Is there a second?
Mary Ann Galezzo, second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call. First, Teresa Manganelli,
Approve.
John Dugas,
Approve.
Marion Galizzo,
Approve.
Michelle Kincaid,
Approve.
Bernie Nally,
Approve.
Kevin Stokes. Here. And Andy.
I was wondering if you were going to call my name. Yes, approved. Thank you.
Everyone's approved. I'm in favor. Passes. Anyone else have any other comments or questions?
Quick question. When do we expect the Shawshene Tech budget?
Jeff?
So I received some information today from the directed to the town managers. We're supposed to have a Zoom session tomorrow. I'm presuming it's the same information you're going to get. I can forward it over. I'll just confirm with Brad Jackson, but we did receive some information today.
Any other
Thank you.
questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Marion Galezzo.
Is there a second?
Second.
Teresa
John Dugas.
Manganelli will second.
Okay.
Everyone seconding.
A roll
Or
call
John
vote.
could.
We'll do a roll call vote. Teresa Manganelli,
Approve.
John Dugas,
Yes.
Marion Galizzo,
Yes.
Michelle Kincaid,
Yes.
Bernie Nally,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
myself, yes, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank you.
night.
Good night.
Bye.
Great night.
Okay, bye.